Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. Mr. Chaz Watkins? Oh shit, I thought, but I didn't flinch or miss a single line in my conversation with Kevin the bartender. I returned to Texas only 6 months ago, after 3 years of exile. How did she find me? And more importantly, why? I didn't turn around and didn't pay any attention to him. I was just about to say the punchline in a particularly vulgar joke when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Mr. Watkins, my name is Rob Morgan. I was hired to find you. I raised an eyebrow at Kevin and turned my head slightly. Do you want to keep this hand, Robbie? I felt his hand leave my shoulder and I turned to Kevin and said my line. He laughed heartily, poured me another shot of Shiner Bock and said it was on the house, and he headed to the other end of the bar, still giggling. Mr. Watkins, we have a matter for you, I interrupted him. My name isn't Watkins, and I don't have anything to do with you unless you want to hire me to cook something. If not, then we have nothing to discuss. Mr. Watt was all he managed to say before he fell to the floor. I put $20 on the counter, massaged my right hand, waved to Kevin, and got up to leave. Mr. Watkins, you're hard to find, and I'm not going to start looking again. I looked down at the taser he was pointing at me, at my crotch no less, a little pussy, and even though he was sprawled on the floor at that time, it was pretty scary. When he stood up, he wiped a trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth. I have no doubts about the use of this device, so sit down and let's have a chat. I glanced at Kevin, who was heading our way, and waved at him. He paused, nodded, and then said, "Let me know if you need anything, Bill." "Thanks, Kevin, I'll do that." I turned around and looked at the asshole with the taser. Who carries a taser in Texas? I grinned and leaned a little closer to him. Do I know you, boy? Get out of here, Mr. Watkins. Your manners need some work, son. You couldn't have been raised in Texas. Why don't you call me Bill and then tell me who you are, what you need? Bill. Yeah? Okay, Bill. Kevin, get us a couple of beers and put it on Robbie's bill. I smiled, sat down in the nearest booth and asked, so why don't you tell me who this Watkins is and why he's got such a big stick up your ass? All right, Bill, we'll play it your way. At least for the moment. Mr. Chaz Watkins was a successful, wealthy businessman from Dallas who disappeared without a trace just over 3 years ago. He is married to Mrs. Amy Watkins, and they have a daughter, Sarah, who is 23 years old. My name, as I said, is Rob Morgan. I was hired to find Chaz Watkins and bring him back to Dallas. Really? 3 years, you say, and without a trace? What does this have to do with me? It looks like you mistook me for him, but I'm not Chaz Watkins and I'm not a successful businessman. My name is Bill Grant. I cook shit for money, play a little guitar badly, and travel a little. I was so careful. Before I left, I paid a lot of money for a brand new identity. Since then, I've grown my hair and beard, lost about 30 pounds of fat, and gained about 20 pounds of muscle. Amy wouldn't recognize me even if I spat on her. I'll have to remember to put this into practice if I ever see her again. When I left Dallas, I drove north and west for 3 days, stopped, found a trailer to rent, enrolled in a welding course at a local community college, and started life anew. I left everything in Dallas except money. A high-paying job, 2 houses, cars, credit cards, keys, a mobile phone, clothes, and a lying, cheating wife. I paid cash for a used Ford F-150, registered it in my new name, and drove it to a record store, where I bought a used but beautiful Martin Dreadnought guitar. I didn't bring anything with me except my clothes. I rarely stayed in one place for more than 6-8 months and always paid in cash. I didn't have any credit cards or a cell phone. I worked for cash, under the table, didn't file a tax return, and almost always avoided trouble. It must have been Sarah. I couldn't erase it completely. About 15 or 16 months after I left, I sent her a letter to let her know that I was alive. I sent her another one before each move, from the computer in the public library, just so she would know that I love her and think about her. I never told her where I was or why I left, and I didn't answer her questions about either. She could squeeze it out of her bitch mother. Shit, shit, shit. Well, Bill, Robbie chuckled. As I said, a little over 3 years ago, Mr. Watkins just disappeared, and no one seemed to know anything about it. For the first year or so, the police tracked this, in my opinion, rather casually, and many suspected that he either ran off with another woman, or that he was the subject of foul play on the part of Mrs. Watkins. It has been a difficult year for Mrs. Watkins, personally, professionally, financially. She tried to liquidate some of their assets, but she didn't have a power of attorney, and she couldn't get Mr. Watkins to be declared dead, so she got stuck. There was money in the bank, but there were few new funds coming in, so she spent it pretty quickly. She hired a lawyer who helped her declare her husband dead. Unfortunately for Mrs. Watkins, about 16 months after her husband disappeared, their daughter Sarah received an email from a man claiming to be Mr. Watkins. The daughter, of course, was delighted, but the recognition of Mr. Watkins as dead became a difficult matter. At that point, the police closed the case, and Mrs. Watkins hired my firm to find Mr. Chaz Watkins and bring him to Dallas to face fraud charges, and so that Mrs. Watkins could gain sole access and control of the family property. Poor darling. I chuckled. She seems to be in a difficult position, so tell me, Robbie, how do I fit into this little made-for-TV movie? Well, Mr. Watkins, may I call you Chaz? You can call me Bill, just like everyone else. I am authorized by the state of Texas to forcibly, if necessary, escort you, Chaz Watkins, to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office to answer charges of fraud and abandonment of a child. I laughed out loud to his annoyance. That's too loud for a little guy, Robbie. Your story is sweet, but what kind of fraud was committed? When did abandoning a shitty marriage become a crime in Texas, and why does the Dallas County Sheriff care? This dog doesn't just hunt, Robbie. I'd say if you ever find this Chaz Watkins, you're going to have to try to scare him better. He doesn't seem stupid to me. It seems to me that convincing him that he should return to Dallas is very difficult, and I suspect that if he just left, then he had a good reason. Let me help you with a little role-playing game, Robbie. Why should he come back? What will he get for it? I think you'll have to dig pretty deep to find the answer to these questions. I emptied my beer bottle and took a sip. Now you can put away your little laser pointer, Robbie. Under the table, I pulled the shutter of my Glock. He really should have paid more attention to people. He lost his color a little, knowing that there was a cartridge in the chamber of the 9mm pistol aimed at him, and carefully brought the taser to the place on the table that I pointed to. I'd like to tell you a story, Robbie. This story was told to me by a friend of mine, I would say, about 3 years ago. Are you listening? Fine. How about a couple more beers and a basket of wings, Kevin? My friend Robbie is paying here. There was one guy I met about 3 years ago, let's call him Chaz. He was married to a woman, let's call her Amy, and coincidentally, they had a daughter named Sarah. That's the story my friend Chaz told me. I can tell you when my marriage ended, or at least at the moment when I realized that he was doomed. It was Amy's 50th birthday. We decided to celebrate her 50th birthday at our country house on the weekend, just the two of us. She has always been a quiet woman who was not interested in parties or elaborate events. We are well provided for, and therefore she had everything she needed and wanted. This made the gift-giving process difficult, but I spent months thinking about what to give her, sensed her subtly in conversations, interviewed her friends, and was pleased with the gifts I chose for her. She obviously doesn't. It became clear as soon as she saw them. Her face fell, just for a moment, before a mask of forced gratitude appeared when she thanked me. By that time, we had been married for 24 years, and I thought I knew her well. But it was obvious to me that she expected something completely different. I thought about this idea for a while and then asked her how she really felt. She assured me that she was happy, but her smile was forced. I insisted on it, and she finally admitted that the gifts were not what she expected, and she was hoping for something more. Well, she wasn't sure what exactly, just not at this. If she didn't know, then how the hell could I know? I apologized for ruining such an important event for her and said I would do my best to make it up to her. She told me that I could make it up to her if I wanted to, but she was very surprised that her 50th birthday was not marked by a more attentive attitude on my part. Yes, I tried to explain to her the reason for each of the gifts, but the more I talked, the more annoyed she became. In the end, I promised to make amends, to which she replied, "If you had thought of me first, you wouldn't have had to try to make amends, and how can you make amends for such a blunder? I will never turn 50 again." Then she told me she wasn't feeling well and wanted to go home to Dallas. We drove home in silence, both fuming. We've almost never been married. We had a long-distance relationship while I was in college. She is 3 years older than me and has already graduated. And when I came to her for a long weekend, I caught Amy cheating. We were walking through the city center when we were stopped by a tall elderly man, about 50 years old, who gently hugged her. Amy introduced the two of us, and when he shook my hand, he grinned. He grinned. He had a weak handshake, and my father taught me to always be careful with people who have a weak handshake, My vigilance was at its height, and I immediately disliked him. "Nice to meet you, Dan. Are you a friend of Amy's father?" I couldn't figure out what it was, but something was wrong here. Amy was a little flustered, and he was acting a little smug. While she was at work that day, I did some digging and found out that they had been dating for about a month. I found their love letters, damn it. She didn't even hide it. We agreed to be exclusive. When I asked her about it, of course, she denied everything. They were just friends. After telling her to fuck off, I immediately left. I didn't call or text her. I didn't answer her calls. I threw her letters in the trash without reading them. Her friends started calling and I ignored them. Then she got my friends to call me and beg for reconciliation. I asked them all to tell her not to worry, that she is now free to make love and marry her grandfather. I fucking hate it when people lie to me. Eventually she came to me and over time was able to convince me to give her a second chance. I gave it to her, but I kept her on a short leash for a very long time and told her unequivocally that if she ever cheated on me again, then everything was over between us. 2 years later, we got married. She never confessed to cheating. After 11 years of marriage, Amy threatened to divorce me. I drank too much, worked too hard, traveled too much, and she didn't want to share her life with me anymore. We had a fight. I told her that while I couldn't limit my travels, I could cut back on work a bit and of course limit my drinking. I begged her to think about our little daughter, Sarah. She eventually agreed, but I was burdened with pretty strict restrictions, and she began to separate our finances and lives. She told me she was just preparing for the inevitable. I pointed out to her that she didn't really seem to want it, but she just shrugged and left the room. However, I was determined, and over the next few years she relaxed. Mostly, I think, because I began to earn several times more than she did. In fact, I paid more taxes than she earned in a year. And separate finances only benefited me, allowing me to pursue my own interests without having to discuss anything with her. I bought a couple of motorcycles, a big sailboat, took piloting lessons, and bought a Cessna airplane. I wore designer suits and drove a BMW of the latest model. I bought our second house in the countryside, a secluded 50-acre place, without any financial help from her. I always made the first contribution to the household, paid for all family vacations, and still I lived a life that she wanted to get a bigger piece of. So she relaxed. I'm not sure we've ever really recovered from this episode. 2 years ago, I was close to divorcing her. Over the years, Amy has become more aggressive towards me. She has become obstinate, and I have become her subordinate. We rarely made love, maybe twice a year, and when we did, it was more like we were both scratching an itch. There was no intimacy, no love. I was sure that she had been cheating on me for many years, but I had no proof. I don't think she had long-term affairs, just a lot of one-night stands during her commute. She became better at changing and hiding it. Our daughter had just left for college, and one evening, after a rather unpleasant and public attack on my character and attractiveness, I had had enough and I gave her an ultimatum. Either we work on becoming a stronger, more loving couple with better communication and an active, full-fledged love life, or we go in different ways. I no longer wanted to live as people just tolerating each other's presence. I had to file for divorce against her before she agreed to talk. We argued for several days, and this was the first time in many years that we actually talked. She didn't want a divorce. It surprised me, and I told her about it. She promised that she would return to our relationship and work on her part of the marriage. I was skeptical, feeling that she really needed my money, but I loved her and eventually gave up. So we agreed on new rules of interaction and communication and started to fix our marriage. I took the initiative and pushed her, and although she seemed content to travel this road with me, I always felt like I was driving Miss Daisy's car. She was in the back seat and admiring the scenery, and I was doing all the hard work. A year later, I told her that I wanted her to sit in the front seat with me and drive the car sometimes. She agreed, but stubbornly continued to sit in the back seat. Of course, she had her own list of complaints, and I listened to them, acknowledged them, and started trying to solve each of them. I loved her, and although she rarely initiated anything to improve our marriage, she participated in everything I suggested, and the situation improved. We began to communicate better and make much more useful love, maybe twice a week, sometimes more. She wasn't as adventurous as she was at the beginning of our marriage, but she agreed to try something new and seemed pleased. I relaxed. We were happy, but I also knew she was holding back. It's been a few weeks since her 50th birthday, and it seemed like the relationship between us was getting cooler. The affection weakened, at least on her part, and the love gradually dried up. When I asked Amy about this, she blamed it on stress at work and promised that when her schedule calmed down, everything would return to normal. But this did not happen. She always had to work long hours in the middle of projects, so at first I didn't see anything alarming in the late nights. But then it began to dawn on me that this seemed more excessive than usual, and that I began to spend more weekends alone at our country house. However, she always had a plausible excuse, and I decided to just wait a little longer. Over the next 6 weeks, we only made love twice, both times at my insistence, and both times she seemed to just put up with it. Immediately after one lovemaking in which she hardly participated, she rolled over on her back, and another time, she just left the room. In the evening and on weekends, she did her best to avoid me. When it was impossible or difficult, she seemed bored at best, but more often she was just annoyed. I remember this picture. The shrew is back. Part of our job over the previous 2 years was to discuss all the problems that arose before they escalated into a fight. And if we did quarrel, we tried to be better, more productive in our conflicts. Remaining as impersonal as possible, we persevered in the solution, always trying to see the other side. We did not tolerate excuses, or non-participation. We have always recognized the feelings of the injured party and tried to solve only these issues. No evasion, avoidance, or blame. When I told her about her schedule, lack of affection, and our dead love life, she didn't want to discuss it. Over the course of several days, she postponed the conversation several times, and when I pointed out that she wasn't playing by our new rules of interaction and communication, she told me to shove those rules up my ass and leave her alone. I suppressed my anger and reminded her between clenched teeth that we had agreed that these rules were important and non-negotiable. She told me to fuck off and negotiate with my right hand from now on. The message is received, loud and clear. Did she cheat on me? Maybe. I didn't need to know. Texas is a state without guilt. But I wanted to know. It was clear that our marriage was over, and if that was the case, then her cheating didn't change much. But I hate being lied to, and this time, she's going to pay for it. I often reminded her that I thought about loyalty and honesty. I understand that you can't choose who attracts you, but you can choose what to do with it. I told her that if she was so attracted to someone else that she couldn't resist using him, we'd get divorced first. It will hurt me, but I will respect her for respecting me so much that she will wait until we get divorced and be honest with me. We could have parted amicably, sort of, and I promised to do the same for her. I should have known for sure, and I had to do something. Before we combined our finances, about 8 years before, I transferred some of my money to an investment account. I also arranged with my employer to have all my bonuses transferred to this new account. I never told my wife about it, mainly because she wanted to control our finances, and I thought I could invest better than she could. It turned out that I was right, and my investment portfolio became very healthy. One of the advantages offered by my long-term employer was the preparation and filing of tax returns, and this was the only area in which my wife and I never got along. At her insistence, 13 years ago, we started filing taxes separately, and she didn't see any real benefit in changing that, so we didn't do it. I suspected that she was hiding money, and decided that this would allow me to hide this investment account from her. I planned to surprise her with retirement money if we lived to see her. In my understanding, if she hadn't cheated and we divorced, I would have gladly divided all our property, but if she had cheated, well, that was another matter. I had to figure out how to protect that money. She will not be rewarded for betrayal and dishonesty. I also had to figure out how to get control of our joint accounts, sell our house in Dallas. It was registered only in my name, but she loved it, and try to keep our suburban property. I loved this place. We planned to live there for retirement, and I didn't want to give it to her or sell it. Of course, if it seemed like I couldn't keep it for myself, then I would make her sell it before I let her take it away. I paid for it, furnished it, and maintained it for 10 years. As far as I understand, she simply had no right to him. If I had to, I'd give her the house in Dallas. I wanted to get rid of him just because she loved him so much, but I would have given up that pleasure if it meant I could keep my country house. It would take time, and I wasn't sure if she wasn't going to just serve me anytime soon, so I got to work immediately. The first thing I had to do was go to a lawyer. One of my old college buddies was a corporate lawyer here in Dallas. I called him and asked him to meet with me, and he readily agreed. We met at a road cafe near his office that evening, and over dinner and a couple of beers, I explained my situation and asked for a referral to a family law lawyer. as well as his personal and legal considerations about my situation. His legal advice was sobering. In fact, I was totally fucked. If I divorced her, there would be no way to protect my property from her. In any case, there are no legal ways. And although there was still a healthy network of decent guys in Texas who disapproved of cheating wives, no guilt meant I could get a 50-50 split with little alimony for Amy. It doesn't matter who did what. If she cheated on me, then no harm, nothing bad. Give her half of everything you have and let her move her boyfriend to your house while you pay her alimony. He advised me from a legal point of view, if it affects the status of my marriage, not to do anything. I just blinked at him. He smiled and said, "Don't divorce her, change the equation. Find out if she's cheating, and if so, use her boyfriend, and take off what you can take with you. Have her file for divorce and try to get back everything you take with you." He referred me to a shark lawyer specializing in family law. She was the only lawyer he was afraid of if he and his wife divorced. That was plan B. Yes, the gravy train for Amy is over. She kept avoiding me, and I let her do it. I no longer asked about her schedule, weekends, our love life, or lack of intimacy, and she seemed to take it as a victory. It's like I just accepted a new situation. Now I spent most of my time at our country house and rarely saw her. It seemed to give her pleasure. My new divorce lawyer met with me and helped me change the beneficiaries in my will, insurance policies, etc. She also suggested that I hire a private investigator because, as she said, Texas may be guilt-free, but there's nothing better than a little visual carnal evidence to push the negotiations in the right direction. I agreed. She recommended a former police officer who ran an agency that she had used for a while with great success, and asked her assistant attorney to contact him to set up an appointment. He accepted me on the same day. I paid for the suite package, and our whole life was equipped with sound and video. In a few days, they found out who, when, and for how long, and worked to obtain video evidence that, according to my lawyer, could help me if it came to divorce. A week later, I sat and watched the video evidence. I was more devastated than I thought, and even Plan B disappeared from my thoughts. Love didn't seem like anything special to me. He wasn't more gifted than me, and he wasn't in the best shape. He didn't have the best techniques and didn't even excite her for the most part. She didn't do anything to him that she didn't do to me, but her companion took every opportunity to verbally lower me, and she enthusiastically participated in this, even offering to make love in my bed next time, which they did. She didn't ask him to put on a condom and tried to figure out how to treat me to cream. Since I hadn't shown any interest in making love to her for some time, they discussed how to overcome it. I didn't know this woman and wondered if I had ever really known her, a feeling of emptiness. Knowing that your spouse is cheating and seeing how he's cheating are completely different things. I have no strength left to fight. I sealed the video and gave it to my lawyer for safekeeping, with instructions to give it to my daughter in the event of my death. I made an advance payment for Sarah's college tuition before graduation, from our joint savings account, and then liquidated my investment account. I lived on what I had from my investment account, and that would have been enough for me for years without being frugal. And now, our shared savings account has been seriously drained. 2 weeks later, I looked around the house for the last time, sighed, and resigned myself to my decision. I left my keys, mobile phone, and wallet on the table in the lobby, where I always left them. I took off my wedding ring and threw it on the pillow that was on my side of the bed. Let her think about it. Then I left. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't leave any letters. I went out the front door without even bothering to close it, walked around the corner, got into my new pickup truck, and drove away. 2 weeks later, a 40-year-old married man and father of 3 was robbed and severely beaten while leaving Motel 6. That's a cheap freak. He was able to walk again, but only after a while, and then with a pronounced limp. A month after the robbery, his wife received a FedEx package with a video of her husband making love to a woman who looked to be about 50 years old. As I understand it, they divorced a year later, and he was broke. After I left, I drove aimlessly for 3 days. I didn't have any plan. Eventually, one day I stopped in a small town for lunch and decided to stay for a while. I found a small community college offering welding courses and signed up. Why not? After 12 months, I managed to find a job as a welder in a car service station. I only had a year of training, so I couldn't get a real welder job, but I found a lot of people willing to hire a guy for cash, as it was much cheaper than a certified welder. and most welders weren't interested in the small jobs I took. I enjoyed my work there for another 4 months before I decided it was time to move on. For the next 2 years, I traveled around the country, stopping from time to time in small towns to make love and cook something. For the first time in many years, I was enjoying life. I hated my job in Dallas. The money was fantastic, but although I was born and excelled at this business, it was difficult for me to get up every morning to spend another day doing this. I did it for my family. Amy expected it, and Sarah deserved it. Amy liked money, which meant she could play the saint while working for a nonprofit organization that gets paid pennies for helping other people. In fact, the organization in which she worked was mainly the wives of wealthy businessmen who wanted to do something and be seen doing it. All their fundraising events were covered in the local newspaper Who's Who, and the dresses worn by the staff cost more than most of their clients earned in a year of hard work. It was a pity, and most of the money raised went to finance the next charity event. Basically, they helped themselves to feel better. Meanwhile, I was working hard at a job that I hated because I loved my family, and that was what was expected of me. When I left, I decided that from now on, I would do everything only for myself. During these 3 years, I have been in love with several women. I enjoyed it and sincerely hoped that they would too, but I was doing it for myself. I wasn't going to settle down, and if they got too intrusive or difficult, I just turned them off. I wanted to sleep together, not find a friend or a soulmate. Since then, I haven't looked back, and I'm not going to. I do not know what became of Amy, the house, or the 50 acres of land in the village, and I do not care. She has chosen her own path in life, and if she is happy with her decision, then I can live with it. I secretly hope this bitch is miserable and penniless, but I'm not going to go out of my way to make that happen. I would like to see my daughter again someday, but only if she promises not to tell Amy about it. So far, it is difficult for her to make such a promise. I keep hoping. As far as I understand, Robbie, my friend is happy now. He's given up a cheating fool and a pathetic job, and he doesn't think about his bitch wife. Why would he come back? To pay her to use him and let her make him unhappy again? It just doesn't make sense to him. He is happy, healthy, and rich in all areas that matter. His wife and his marriage to her made him unhappy. When he finally woke up and gave up, he realized that the only 2 good things that came out of it were his daughter, and ultimately, his freedom. He finally realized that in fact he was the only one in this marriage. He told me that after he left and tried a few other women, he realized that even the girl she was bringing wasn't that good. Looking back, he realized that she had never ever brought her best game into marriage. She's been playing with him for 24 fucking years. It doesn't seem like something worth staying for. Or go back. Hey Kev, how about a couple more beers? He told me that he felt that his wife was a narcissistic narcissist, and therefore he decided that the cruelest thing he could do to her was to ignore her. He didn't want her to see his pain, so she could feed off it and feel like she mattered because of it. Indifference was the key. It would have killed her, but how could he be next to her and be indifferent? He decided that if he just left everything, he would tell her that he didn't care about not only her, but their whole life together. He decided that it might take years, but in the end, she would stumble and be defeated, and in this, he would win. Robbie sighed and nodded. You're an interesting person, Bill, and it's a good story. Where is your friend now? I shrugged my shoulders. Who the hell knows, Robbie? He's making love somewhere and cooking something. Definitely not working hard for an ungrateful, cheating fool. I think he's probably in Wisconsin. He told me that he always wanted to see Wisconsin. Wherever he is, I'm sure he's happy as a pig in shit and doesn't want to change anything. Tell me, why doesn't your friend Mrs. Watkins just file for divorce because of the rejection of the child? Wouldn't that give her control over the marital property she wants so badly? It seems to me that this is a simple solution to her problem, and then you can stop looking for this shay and anger complete strangers in the process. There are no more assets to take control of, Bill. She tried to apply to leave the family, but because she tried to declare him dead at first, by the time she got to the application, she had lost her house, suburban real estate, and job. What are you saying? What happened, and why are you still looking for this guy? Well, she ran out of money. She couldn't afford real estate on her salary, and since she couldn't sell them, both properties were confiscated. The house was bought by an elderly retired couple, and the country estate was bought by a company called COWLC, which is something like a metal decoration consulting company. Mrs. Watkins lost her job when it was revealed that she was having an affair with a married employee. Wow, she's definitely a nervous fool, isn't she, Robbie? He nodded. Well, I'm sorry I wasted your time, Bill, but I almost enjoyed meeting you. He took $40 out of his wallet, threw them on the table, stood up and held out his hand to me. No hard feelings? None, I said. But in the future, you should be careful who you upset. You're lucky I'm such a patient guy. He laughed as he turned to leave. He took about 6 steps before stopping and without turning around asked, Bill? Yes? For that matter, Amy still loves him. She is sorry and hopes to get him back. She's depressed, she drinks too much and can't cope. Women like her don't know what love is, Robbie. They love themselves and love what other people give them. They are consumers and are not able to think about others. They are greedy and vile and deserve any suffering they bring upon themselves by their abuse of others. If she was sorry, she wouldn't have continued to make love to other men. She only regrets that she is not provided for, that people can find out the truth about her. She is sorry that she was caught and that the money ran out. If she was really sorry, she could have thought about her daughter's feelings and that she was suffering without a relationship with her father. She could have thought about what she put her husband through and left him alone. She doesn't deserve him, but she won't admit it. In her distorted, sick little world, she is the center of the universe, and reality, responsibility, love, respect, and honesty work only when they correspond to her goals. He and his daughter deserve better, don't you think? He slowly turned to face me. Chaz? Yes, Bob? It can be cold in Wisconsin in winter, but I know that Sarah likes it there. Maybe WDWLC should move its office to Racine, a city in Wisconsin? Thanks, Bob. Maybe. Everything is possible.